As a result, the reader is not left with a clear impression of where either Major stands, or more importantly, where the Black Panther Party stands. Perhaps the Black Panther Party was itself unsure of what to do with this issue, as can be imagined by looking at these different quotes. However, even if this were the case, it still does not get Major off the hook for his own ambivalence. Although, you know what? I mean, looking back over what I had written 20 years ago here, it does seem to me that there is a difference in situation. One is kind of talking about an alliance with kind of white radicals. The other is just talking about kind of using white lawyers. It's not exactly the same thing. So I may have been making too much out of that. Anyways, moving on to the third point. Third point of interest is Major's consistent bias towards the Black Panthers whenever a Panther police conflict is reported. So in the first chapter, Major spends the whole first chapter kind of describing the poor conditions that the blacks in the ghettos live in. And the entire second chapter is spent giving example after example of police brutality against black people. In every example, the guilty policeman always ends up being found innocent by his colleagues or by the courts. Even though I knew Major was writing about conditions almost 30 years ago, 30 years ago in 1998 when I wrote this, 50 years ago now, I was still left with a hatred of the police by the time I had finished the second chapter. Now, it is well known that the Black Panthers and the police came into conflict more than once. Major consistently lays the blame at the feet of the police. Much of this is very well argued, and he uses common sense to destroy the alibis of the police. When the Panthers' entire Illinois office was destroyed by the police, who claimed the Panthers were sniping at them from their offices, Major writes, "Imagine a group with enough sophistication and political know-how to build a nationwide organization in the period of a couple years could not develop a sense of tactic sufficiently refined to avoid shooting at policemen from their own headquarters." By showing holes in the testimony of police, Major eloquently shows how ridiculous it is to believe the charges that Huey Newton killed a policeman in cold blood, and how much more likely it is that Newton killed the officer in self-defense. Major also writes about the murder of Bobby Hutton and Fred Hampton, again showing how the story of the police did not match the evidence. However, as I continued reading through the book, I began to doubt some of Major's bias. Was every policeman the Panthers encountered racist, violent, and dishonest? Could the police be at fault in every shootout with the Panthers? I mean, it did seem, as you're kind of reading this book, and there's a lot of examples of conflict between the Panthers and the police, I thought, well, yeah, some of these cases, the policemen must be at fault, but maybe some of them, the Panthers are at fault. I mean, you know, statistically, right? Can't be the policeman's fault all the time. I'll tell you what, though, I am more, I don't know what the word is, cynical maybe, after these past few years with kind of this Black Lives Matter thing, where week after week there's kind of a black person shot by the police for no reason. After kind of all this that's been happening in the news, and I think you could make the argument it's always been happening, but it's not been in the news. I'm starting to think that, yeah, maybe the Panthers were kind of the victim every single time there's a Panther police shootout. I don't know. Anyways, going back to what I wrote 20 years ago. What caused me to think particularly were the cases in which former Black Panthers testified against their comrades. One example is George Sams Jr., a former Panther who claimed he was ordered to kill Alex Rackley, who was a member of the Harlem chapter of the Black Panthers, by Bobby Seale. Although Major points out holes in Sam's testimony, he later changed his story to say he took orders from Stokely Carmichael. One wonders what would possess Sams to bring this testimony before his former comrades if it were not true. Although Major scornfully rejects Sam's testimony, he never answers this question. However, in light of what we now know about the FBI's systematic attempts to destroy the Panthers, perhaps Major's claims do not seem all that unlikely. Since we also know that the FBI infiltrated the Panthers with undercover agents, it's quite possible that these renegade Panthers were more than what they seem. So none of that was, I think, known at the time this book came out in 1971. That kind of COINTEL reveal was a few years later. Anyways, Major goes to great lengths to explain in the second chapter of his book both the racist nature of the police force and the solidarity which the police show each other, to the point of protecting a comrade they know is in the wrong. In this respect, perhaps his consistent bias for the Panthers is not all that unbelievable. So, after being at first skeptical, after some consideration, I am siding with Major on this one. The Panthers were probably more consistently the victims of police aggression instead of the originators of the violence. I wish to emphasize that despite the critical nature of this review, I found Major's book enjoyable and his perspectives refreshing, except the places where I've noted. Major treats the Panthers with an open mind, and I find this admirable.